Hi, I'm a forester here with another forestry tale. I started writing a book quite a few years ago about things that have actually happened to me in my life, and I gave up on the book, or at least I stopped it temporarily, but I read the first story about a year ago. I do this mainly for my family members just to preserve the stories, but anybody that's interested is welcome to listen. This story took place in the 1980s, I'll say mid-1980s, and it's entitled The Kingstree Caper. A winter wonderland unfolded before me as I drove into view of the company orchard and office complex. Curiosity had gotten the better of my judgment in making the 30-minute drive from my home in Kingstree to the orchard near Pineville to see how the young trees had weathered the freak snowstorm. Snow is a rarity this far south, especially in a quantity that had fallen overnight. The orchard trees were bent over, touching the ground under the weight of the wet snow. The dark green pine foliage contrasted vividly against the brilliant white snow, creating a scene suitable for a December calendar or a winter resort postcard. As is often the case, though, the forces of nature can be both deadly and beautiful at the same time. These trees were my livelihood, the culmination of years of hard work. Loblolly pines, selected from wild stands for their outstanding traits, had undergone genetic testing by tree breeders since the 1950s. This particular orchard was made up of the best offspring of those ancestral trees, selected from replicated progeny tests planted across the South. The seed that would be harvested from this orchard would provide seedlings to reforest the company's 500,000 acres in the Carolinas and Georgia. An inspection of the orchards relieved my worries for the most part. The trees were young and flexible enough to give to the snow without breaking. Other than an occasional broken limb, there was no major damage. Perhaps it was true that the graft unions were the strongest parts of the stems. Relieved, my mind shifted to the return trip home to Kingstree. The ride down US 52 early that morning had been something of an adventure. My vehicle had made the first tracks in the freshly fallen snow. I decided to take a little accident insurance on the return trip as I loaded a Honda four-wheel work ATV into the back of my pickup. Not looking forward to being stranded, I could always make it home eventually on the back of the four-wheeler. Fortunately, the drive home was uneventful, with only a few other adventurous souls on the road. Our neighbors were out in their yards as I pulled into my driveway. Schools closed down at even the hint of a snow in this part of the South. This time it was justified, though, and the kids were taking advantage of the opportunity. Snowball fights and building snowmen were the order of the day. Being a kid at heart, I unloaded the Honda and tooled over to where a congregation had formed in the Baptist church parking lot. 4 neighborhood ladies, Judy, Diane, Sally, and Wanda, were visiting while their children played in the snow. The Honda was a big hit as I gave child after child a ride in the parking lot. The idea caught on as one boy, Will, raced home to get his go-kart and challenged me to a race. One race was enough for me, though, as the lumbering ATV was no match for the nimble go-kart. Unknowingly, the real action was soon to begin. I pulled the Honda up to the group of neighborhood ladies huddled at the entrance to the church parking lot. Judy's eldest, Hodge, dismounted from the bike where his brother Lamont was eagerly anticipating his ride. The group looked up as a car approached from the railroad tracks down Brook Street. At the same time, a second vehicle, a police car, turned the corner and began heading down the street from the opposite direction. So far, there had been little traffic on the streets, and the children had turned them into a playground. The passenger car slowed as it approached our group. Without warning, the car suddenly turned into our driveway 2 houses away, and the driver, a young black man, jumped out of the car and began running toward the back of our house lot. The car kept rolling as the driver was in such a hurry that he left it in gear. Reacting quickly, the policeman stopped his car in the street, jumped out, and took off after the runner. The man's fight or flight reaction betrayed his guilt to a yet unknown crime. "Go get him, Tim," Diane ordered. Like a Marine recruit responding to his drill instructor's command, I revved the Honda's engine, twisted the handlebars, and roared off down the church's parking lot. Knowing the community layout well, I decided to play the long odds. Our lot backed up to the church's playground, which was surrounded by a chain-link fence. 3 strands of barbed wire topped the fence. On the other side of the church's playground was a school football field. Odds were that the policeman would corner the runner at the back of our lot. In that case, I doubted that he would need much assistance. If, on the other hand, the runner were really motivated or drug-crazed enough, he might escape capture by climbing over both fences on each side of the playground. I doubted the policeman would be equally motivated. Under that scenario, my role would play out on the football gridiron. It only took a minute for me to race from the parking lot to the school building down Academy Street. Finding my way to the back of the school was a little more challenging, as this unfamiliar territory was covered under a blanket of snow. Not knowing what to expect, I brought the ATV to a halt at the entrance to the football field. The view was remarkable, as no tracks were visible in the virgin snow. The neighborhood children had not discovered this treasure yet. Sitting there for a minute, I began to think that maybe I had guessed wrong. Perhaps the barbed wire atop the fences had done their jobs as effective barriers. Suddenly, movement at the side of the field broke my moment's solitude. Focusing, I watched as the man approached the fence through some brush. He climbed over the fence as if it were not there and landed on his feet on the other side. He took off running across the field at what would have been the 50-yard line, like O.J. Simpson in a Buffalo playoff game. He was home free, or so he likely thought, as the policeman was nowhere in sight. I swung into action, kicking the Honda into gear and revving its engine to a roar. I picked up speed quickly, shifting from gear to gear. No plan was needed as my adrenaline rush took over. My course of action was set to intersect with the runner's path at midfield. Hearing the distant noise, the runner looked downfield to see what was going on. His look of confidence quickly faded into one of despair as the unlikely turn of events dawned on him. Just my luck, he must have thought, as he picked up his pace to hopefully make it across the field and out of my reach. The runner was no match for my Honda, especially in the deep snow, as I bore down on him quickly. Angling my path to pass by just behind him, I lunged off the machine, tackling him at midfield. Exhausted, he had little fight left in him and yielded to my citizen's arrest. Not exactly sure what to do with him now that I had him, I made him spread eagle over the motorcycle. Joe Friday would have been proud. For a few minutes, it was just 2 men from different walks of life relating to each other under an unforeseen circumstance. "What are you running from?" I asked. It seemed the obvious question. "I stole a car in Sumter," he replied, obviously without advice from a lawyer. It was his first car theft, and he panicked at the sight of the police car, thinking that he had surely been caught. Maybe the memory of his dramatic capture by a concerned citizen would discourage him from a life of crime. Running up to the fence, the police officer realized what had happened. He laboriously climbed over the fence, thankful that speed was no longer essential. His handcuffs made the arrest official, and we headed back to where the chase had begun. I pulled up to the group of neighborhood ladies still talking and unaware of the drama that had played out nearby. "Did you get him?" Diane asked simply. "Yep," I replied. "I got him."